Welcome to the Relaunch Your Career podcast. I am your host, Leah Lambert, career and interview coach and founder of Relaunch Me, where we help you find the work that you were meant to do. Welcome to the Relaunch Your Career podcast. Today, I am very much looking forward to interviewing Virginia Wheway. Virginia is an expert in analytics, machine learning, and developing business strategies for data and analytics functions. She has had over 35 years' experience across many industry sectors, including aviation, transport, manufacturing, medicine, and futures trading. She's held senior leadership roles for over 20 years and has been successful in building and developing effective teams. She holds a PhD in data mining, a Bachelor of Mathematics with honours from the University of Wollongong, a Graduate Diploma in Epidemiology from the University of Newcastle, and she's also undertaken postgraduate studies in executive management at the Wharton School, University of Pennsylvania, and completed a grad cert in change management through University of New South Wales. Welcome to the podcast, Virginia. It's great to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks for the invitation.
Virginia, we met a couple of months ago and I was really fascinated with your career story and how you have developed such a strong career with your mathematical and statistics background. Can you tell us a little bit more about your career story and how you came to choose a career in this area in the first place?
Interestingly, I was always good at maths at school. I'm one of those kids that didn't fear maths. I know a lot of kids do fear maths. And just on the chance, I applied for a cadetship or an internship in mathematics at BHP following school, but all I ever wanted to do was be a vet. And so I studied really hard. I got into vet science, but in the meantime, I'd actually started my internship before university went back. And I actually realized there was a whole lot of applications for maths and statistics, I say, in the real world and in industry. And in those sort of 2 or 3 months over summer, starting the cadetship, I decided to stick at that and forego doing vet science, which is what I'd always wanted to do since a child. And I have not regretted it at all.
Wow, very much a sliding doors moment by the sounds.
Yes.
And can I take you back to those early days? What might an average day look like for a statistician or data analyst when you first started out?
So in the early days as an analyst, you're often told what to analyze or you're given hypotheses from the companies. So for example, at BHP, they were changing some of their cooling mechanisms on steel and they were saying, does that make it more accurate with size? In medicine, people have different drugs. Does that change their outcomes for different diseases? When I worked in e-commerce, they would change perhaps the location of buttons on their website, or they'd change the amount of different deals. And as an analyst, people will then ask you, can you use your skills to tell us yes or no if these things have made a difference and how much? So that's in the early days as an analyst. As you move through your career, you then become that sort of interface to the business to try and work out what are the priorities of the team. For those of you who do work in data already or have seen people work in it, there's always more questions than we have resources and time to answer. So as you start to move into leadership in the data and math space, you will be the one working out where is the best bang for the buck, to use the resources in the data team that I have and how should we prioritize these projects. Also managing the people who are asking these questions, managing their expectations with how long it will take to get an answer. And even I've become more experienced at saying you can have an 80% answer, say in 2 weeks, but if you want a 100% watertight answer, that might take 6 weeks and 3 times as much money. So you can put it back on the business to say, where do you want that level of accuracy or speed of answer?
Very interesting. Often when I speak with people about a career in data analysis, I think people have this vision of sitting behind a computer all day, crunching numbers in Excel. But it sounds like there's a lot of stakeholder management, a lot of communicating information to the business. Does that, like when you first start off as a data analyst, is it a bit more behind the scenes and then as you evolve, your career becomes more people facing?
That's what I've found, and that's what I've seen with teams that I've managed, and even younger people that I've mentored in these careers. It's sort of proving your worth, or proving your value behind the screen, so to speak. But then even when you get results, it's not just a matter of, I say, you don't just throw it over the fence to the person who's asking the question. You say, this is what I found, this is what I'm seeing. What do you think about this? Does this resonate? Does this surprise you? Do you want it, does this make sense? Is it understandable? And so even in the early days behind the screen, you really have the opportunity to practice your interaction and partnership skills with people, the people who have asked you the question. And then now I've moved to sort of the last, probably 15 or more years of my career where I've barely touched a piece of code. So I've sort of been in charge of the team and made the decisions about what projects to work on. But that said, I still can code. I code in R is the tool I use. And I do have the ability to experiment and test things. So sometimes in the evenings, I will tinker and experiment, but I will then give the task to my team who are very proficient and do that, day to day. But I have this sort of, I say, the street cred with the team because I can model, I can code. It just hasn't been my role, and it's not really efficient these days.
Interesting. And so I feel like when people look at data analysis as an entry-level career, then you're starting with perhaps advanced Excel. I never know whether it's SQL or SQL.
Either. Yeah. Yeah.
And then there might be Python. Like, what would be the technologies or the software that someone needs to be across these days starting out a career in that space?
Yeah, so definitely SQL, SQL, and Python tend to be the kind of entry level or transitional data skills. R is a tool that's is preferred more by mathematicians and statisticians. So those people who have done that very, very sort of deep training. So R and Python can do a lot of the same things, but the tweaking you can do with models in R is much more advanced and much more intuitive than with Python. But when I've been looking at job ads, in the last, probably I'd say even a year, they're pretty much all saying Python. And the beauty is that you can learn a lot of that online, either, YouTube, DataCamp, Coursera, many other places can teach you those skills. So
that brings me to my next question, because I think it can be very confusing that you could go onto Udemy and an online learning platform and do 30 hours of coding and practice and teach yourself. You could go and do a 6-week boot camp or a 6-month boot camp, or you could go and do a master's or a grad cert or a grad dip in business analytics. What would you recommend these days for someone who's wanting to move, perhaps have a career change into this space?
So I would actually recommend a two-pronged approach for people. So I think as I just mentioned, doing some online courses and really getting proficient and doing boot camps in coding, but to actually learn the fundamentals of how to look at data, how to break down data, how to question where your data came from. Is the sample size enough? Is it too noisy? Am I even going to be able to get anything out of that? That's where the formal training and the formal education is really, really beneficial, because they're the sorts of questions you'll need to ask, I say, in the real world. Is that, the data that you might see in medicine is similar but different to the data you might see on a mining truck or in an e-commerce platform. You still need to know what are the right questions, the critical thinking around the data that I need to ask before I look at it. And if I'm using certain analysis techniques, what are the pitfalls and what are the benefits of each of the different techniques? It can be difficult to get that just from a YouTube video, whereas some of the academic programs are very rigorous in holding your hand and taking you through that journey around data analysis.
That's really interesting. And another thing I wanted to touch on, we obviously, in the bio that I read out for you, that you've obviously worked across a breadth of different industries. And it seems to me that one of the the advantages or selling points of a career as a data analyst is that you can seem to move across different industries and look at a whole range of different problems. Would that still be the case, or do recruiters tend to favour someone with specific industry knowledge?
Yeah, very great question. There are some industries that tend to only want to hire from internally. So some of the banking, finance, and insurance sectors are tougher to break into because they often have a industry knowledge first as their first criteria, and then they look at the data skills. But as you can see, I jumped from was aviation, then I went to public transport, and then I went to economics consulting. Then I went to mining, and then I went to e-commerce, and then trading, and and even now I'm interviewing. I'm looking at different roles in many other different sectors. So, yeah.
So breadth of different careers.
Yeah, and that's been great. It's been sort of data skills first in many of the industries I've worked in, and it's interesting how you can pick up. If I just use a quick example, one of my team members was in medical research before she came into my team in mining and was working on lung cancer survival models. And then she was given a problem in the mining industry looking at truck survival, so truck engine survival models. And it was exactly the same technique. And she was really chuffed, as we all were, that she could basically take the work she'd done and then apply it to medicine and trucks. Apply it to completely different, but the same technique. And with her foundational training, she knew where the pitfalls were and what to look for in her models.
Yeah, wow. And so such a diverse industries, but different.
Yes.
And so with the, I guess, the emergence of AI and machine learning, how has that changed these roles over the last couple of years?
Yes, it's been interesting. I think the understanding, so AI and machine learning has had a very big public awareness boom and public use boom over the last, probably 18 months, 2 years. So probably not even 2 years, but they've been around since some of these techniques have been around since the 1950s. So yes, I think I read sort of 1950 was the first artificial intelligence algorithm that was built. And even when I was studying in the mid 1990s, I don't know if people remember the story about Deep Blue, the IBM computer that was trained to play the world grandmaster chess champion. In the first round, I think in the first round of 6, the computer lost. In the second round, they rejigged some parameters and the computer won. So this was, 90s, that was 30 years ago. This was happening. So it's been around for a long time, but the recent advent of processing power and the much cheaper cost of processing massive amounts of information has led to the models like ChatGPT really, really being much more powerful. And I believe even the people who developed it surprised themselves when they said, let's get a huge amount of bandwidth, try and train this thing. And they really surprised themselves with what they came up with. So I think the thing that has changed is that a lot of us practitioners, I guess, have been doing these models for years and years and years, but more maybe just in our own community and amongst other practitioners. We've also been held back by the cost of processing and the cost of storing data and collecting data. That's now very different currently. And I think one of our big challenges, and we might get into this, is questioning if anyone can sort of learn very quickly to use ChatGPT or image generation, but to really understand what is under the hood and what is behind it. I think that's where people who can learn and understand that and add insight to companies, I think, have a really big opportunity when people start to question, well, what even is there? What's under the hood?
Yeah, interesting. And so one of the questions I was going to ask you is, as someone who's been formally trained in AI and machine learning, you've done a PhD, and we're starting to see more of our clients who've done postgraduate study in AI and machine learning. What sort of content would they cover in these postgraduate courses? I assume there's a lot more than learning how to use ChatGPT.
Yeah, that's the first 5 minutes, maybe, how to use ChatGPT. No, it's really interesting. So when you think about human intelligence, it's not just repeating words and script back to people. It's recognizing images. It's recognizing patterns in data. It's recognizing patterns in games and patterns that we see in everyday life. So when you do a postgraduate study or do some study, you will actually be taught all of these different techniques of different types of human intelligence. So I actually did look up I looked up the syllabus of a few courses before I jumped on, and it was, as I suspected, almost what I learned many years ago, just with more computing power. So yeah, there's this whole section on image and image recognition. You'll learn about robotics and, coding robotics to perform human functions. You'll learn about data analysis and finding patterns and historic trends in data so that you can then predict the future. You'll learn about chatting and voice recognition and video recognition. And I think the courses that are really good too also have like an ethical component of analysing, human intelligence and human behaviour versus machine intelligence, and where are the boundaries, and what are some of the questions we really should be asking.
Yeah, that I found that really, really interesting. I've had a couple of clients who are looking at careers in those areas. So what sort of jobs do you say? So if someone was to go and study a postgraduate course and specialise in this area, what sort of jobs do you see these people moving into in the next 5 or 10 years?
Yeah, there's a lot of jobs out there at the moment where, and it was what was happening in the data space maybe 5 or so years ago, where companies wanted to get on board and knew they needed to get serious. And in my day, it was we want to get serious about data stuff. And now it's we want to get serious about this AI stuff. We don't want to miss the boat. But a lot of them, they don't know what they don't know. So someone who's very experienced or has really good knowledge in defining business problems, working in business strategy, helping the business prioritize projects and prioritize strategy. If you can then overlay that with the knowledge of how AI works and what it can bring to the table, I think there's a really big opportunities for those sorts of people. So to perhaps, take a little career break or study in the evening and add that extra technical knowledge to your toolkit. There are a lot of companies out there who want to hire AI people, but they want someone who's knowledgeable to tell them where to start and what the roadmap will look like and how AI can bring benefit to their particular part of the world.
So we're talking about perhaps people who've got a fair bit of business knowledge behind them, the people that you're referring to there. Do you see that there will be entry-level roles also available for people who've maybe studied a Bachelor of AI, for example?
I do, but I do see, and I'm sort of speaking from my experience of having looking, following the job market and looking at a lot of ads, is that at the moment they're looking for the translator type roles, so the AI translator to business to make it relevant to business. And then I do feel that once the business is comfortable and gets a handle and says, okay, this is going to be our AI roadmap for the next 1, 3, 5 years, and then they will need the people to actually do it. So to actually, a bit like I mentioned earlier with the data analysis, when you're behind the screen, the doing. I think once businesses get comfortable with roadmaps, then they'll need the doers. But also I think in good news, they're moving very quickly. So the sentiment is this is AI and machine learning are moving so quickly. Businesses don't want to miss out. We want to get on this. What are we doing? What are we doing? I think the developing roadmaps is there's quite a bit of time pressure and urgency to doing that.
Interesting. And so what skills do you, like from someone who wants to upskill in their digital skills, what skills do you feel are most in demand at the moment? What are you hearing?
So definitely the coding skills. So example again with so if we start with SQL, it means you're actually able to get the data to train these models on. So first step is that you can access, clean, filter the data, and then secondly, Python, you can actually build some models from scratch yourself. So that's what a lot of companies are building models themselves. There are software companies trying to say that they are the latest and greatest in AI, but they're generally just good at one. So perhaps it might be a very good text reading piece of software, or it might be a very good image classification piece of software. But to have someone who knows the fundamentals and can code some of that up themselves and demonstrate what's possible would be, a very good skills.
Okay, what about Power BI? I'm hearing from recruiters that there's a lot of demand for that skill at the moment. Are you hearing the same?
Yeah, so that's the data visualization type of area. So that's it. So it's not really building the models or building kind of nitty-gritty predictions or machine intelligence. Power BI is the ability to take existing data and to present it in a consumable, a trustworthy, and an appealing way to decision makers and to the company. So definitely, so Power BI, Tableau is a competitor. Spotfire, and I'm going to miss one. There's another big one, but I can't think of it off the top. But the data visualization is becoming a really big skill as well. But if you are wanting to go into data visualization, I wouldn't recommend doing a machine learning or an AI qualification. I would say do a business intelligence qualification. So I think, again, you could sort of branch all of these things out. So actually building models, go and do an AI machine learning qualification, building dashboards and reporting and communicating results, then business intelligence, business analytics would be the way to go.
Yeah, so it's really important is you need to look at the subjects in that course and make sure you're doing the right one.
Yeah, exactly. And you don't, for the business intelligence, you really don't need that heavier Python and coding skills. Still SQL, because I think nearly every company wants more efficient ways of accessing the data. But to do dashboards, then that would be the course I would direct people to.
Okay, excellent. Great advice. You've got a very strong mathematical background yourself. Do you find that most people who succeed in as a data analyst tend to have a strong mathematical background, or do you believe people can go into data analysis without that sort of background?
So no, I've actually seen brilliant graphic designers and journalists go into the data space because they can tell a story and they can draw out the key messages and tell a compelling story. So I would say no, you don't have to have that really strong mathematical skill. But if you think about data careers as a spectrum, almost from the very visual and very easily digestible, right the way through to, the things we were talking about earlier, building machine learning models from scratch, then at that other end of the spectrum, then yes, you would need mathematical skills. And even, hate to say, as you move through your career, to actually have credibility with other modelers, that there is definitely a community of people that they can look skeptically at you if you dismiss some of the maths and some of the assumptions in the really fundamental modeling work.
Right. So that maths, statistics background, really sort of gives you those foundational skills.
Yeah, it does, yes. And it doesn't rule you out of not having maths, doesn't rule you out of a data career by any means. It means that perhaps you would look at a different entry point to that data career than people who have perhaps always loved maths or always gone and studied maths would look, and they would enjoy, I would say, a different entry point than those who are more visual thinkers and more visually express themselves more visually.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Now I think of there's a client I know who has a music background, who is a musician and studied a Bachelor of Music, who's moved into data analysis with no mathematical background.
Yeah, well, I've heard actually even the parts of your brain and the thinking with music and maths and data and structure are actually quite aligned. So it doesn't surprise me. And I know some of the media outlets now actually have data journalists or data journalists on their staff. Data storytellers is another career that I've seen come up as well.
Interesting. So, Virginia, what advice would you have for someone who is interested in, developing AI machine learning skills and moving into this sort of career path?
I think firstly, that like the two-pronged advice, get your coding up to scratch or do a lot of practice coding. There's a lot of meetup groups and community groups that are free that you can go to after work in various cities and learn and have talks and meet up with other people. So firstly, the coding skills. And then secondly, I would recommend researching. There are quite a few Master of Data Science, grad certs in data science or AI. Research those sorts of courses. And to be honest, I think a 1-year course would be plenty. There are quite a few sort of some of the Ivy League universities that offer 6-week courses in these things. Employers are a bit wise to some of those. So the depth that you go into, I mean, it looks good on your CV, but the depth you go into is not really sufficient to get you through that screening round. So the employer would be looking at more rigorous study.
Yeah, so postgrads or even a grad cert.
A grad cert, yeah, or a master. I don't think there's like a coursework master's or a grad cert. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think most Australian universities are offering those. They've sort of pivoted, they're offering those these days. But the ones that it's the data and analytics and business intelligence ones, they're more of the analyst dashboarding presentation type skills. And then the previous ones I described, artificial intelligence, machine learning, is that if you want to sit and build things.
I guess it's sort of how long is a piece of string, but for someone who's never done any coding, how long does it take to learn something like Python?
I've seen people in about 6 weeks become proficient enough. So if you can read data in, if you can sort and transform, say this column minus that column, if you can draw charts, if you can adapt and edit charts, if you can build basic predictive models, people can do that in about 6 weeks.
Okay. So that's doable, isn't it?
It's doable. It's doable, and it's quite intuitive language. I know back in my day, I learnt. I'm showing my age. I learnt in C and COBOL and what was the other one? Pascal, and it was very specific. If you didn't put a comma in the right spot, or if you didn't name your variable the right number of characters, the whole thing crashed. Whereas they're much more forgiving and much more intuitive. Python in particular, and I believe R is as well. If you're into statistics and modelling.
Yeah, personally, no, I don't think that would.
And it's not everyone's cup of tea. It's my cup of tea. It's not everyone's cup of tea.
I mean, it sounds to me, I often recommend to people go and do a little taster course. So it might be a little online course on Udemy to see if there is the aptitude and the interest first before, then maybe committing to a 6-week course, which might then lead on to a postgraduate course. I think
and especially when there's cost involved as well. These days the cost of education and even student debt is a pretty hot topic. Cost of living is a hot topic as well. I agree. I also find Data Camp, so DATA Camp, is a very good place to dip your toe in the water in this space too.
And that's an online learning platform.
That's an online learning platform, but specifically, obviously, for data specific topics.
Right. I'll add that one to my
list. Yeah, it's very tight, and it's very it knows what it needs to teach in data, and it just does a very good job of that.
Great. Excellent. And look, I think they're great little career experiments, are they? Sort of, and you can build that momentum and see whether it's something you want to do long term before committing to a more expensive or time consuming course.
Mm-hmm. And even for personal interest's sake, in Seek and Indeed and LinkedIn, just set yourself up a search on AI or machine and see what jobs come up. Maybe I might be proven wrong, because there might be currently more entry-level jobs, but just see what's coming up. And often the keywords in those job ads are the key skills that you need to have. So go and work out how to get them.
Yeah, look, great advice, Virginia. Anything else that we've missed, or anything else that you feel you'd like to add to someone who's considering a career in this space?
Gosh, I think it's only going to grow. I think there will be a bubble when all of the hype of AI this and AI that. But again, as I reassure you, this stuff has been around since the 1950s, and it's been more the advent of computing power that's helped it grow and helped it raise public awareness. So I think it's only going to grow, and the more case studies and the more that people see companies succeeding with particular AI case studies, then more people will want it, and more and more.
Yeah.
Yes. So you won't be out of a job, because there is also a lot of really fundamental science behind it. So it's not just some loose idea that someone put into a computer and invented something. There's a lot of science behind these tools.
So definitely an emerging field, and something that people probably should be encouraged to give a go.
Definitely. And I think if you can help companies demystify and understand what AI is, if you can offer that to someone, you'll be gold to them.
Excellent. Virginia, thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to speak with me. Really appreciated your advice, and I've learned a lot. So I'm sure the audience has as well. So thank you.
Pleasure.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Relaunch Your Career. If you did, please subscribe, share with your friends, leave a review, or connect with us on social media at Relaunch Me Career Consulting. If you have any questions about the episode or the work that we do, then contact us via the website relaunchme.com.au. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.